Well, I woke up this morning to the news that Canada and the United States failed to reach a trade agreement. And you know what? I'm okay with that. In fact, I fully support Prime Minister Mark Carney and our negotiating team for just walking away. I'd much rather see Canada walk away from a deal than sign one simply so Donald Trump can announce that he got another country to bend to his demands. There is no prize for signing a bad trade deal. The trade agreement is supposed to benefit both countries. That is why you negotiate. Canada isn't going to get everything it wants, and the United States is not going to get everything that it wants. That has to be a compromise involved. That's how negotiations work. The problem is, compromise has to come from both sides. From everything we're hearing about these latest negotiations, Canada was prepared to compromise. We were prepared to make concessions. We were prepared to find common ground. The United States apparently wasn't prepared far enough. So instead, we got more demands, more tariffs, more threats, more conditions. Eventually, you have to say, enough. There are some things Canada simply cannot negotiate away, and our sovereignty is one of them. Canada has every right to develop trade relationships with countries other than the United States. We have every right to determine our own economic policies, our own agricultural policies, our own food standards, and our trading relationships around the world. The United States is our largest trading partner, but it is not our economic landlord, and that's an important distinction to make. Then there's supply management and dairy. We've been arguing about this with the Americans for many years. Canada already provides American dairy producers with tariff-free access through established quotas. The thing is, those quotas have historically hardly ever been completely filled. So I find it rather difficult to understand the argument that Canada's dairy system is somehow shutting American farmers out of our market. Then we get into something even more fundamental, language. Apparently, the United States wanted concessions involving French language requirements on packaging rules within Quebec. Sorry, that's not a trade concession. That is Canada. French isn't some convenient regulation we can erase from a package because Washington doesn't like it. French is one of Canada's two official languages. Quebec has its own laws protecting the French language and culture, and whatever Canadians may debate among ourselves about those laws, those are Canadian decisions. They aren't bargaining chips in Washington. The same applies to our food standards. Canada has the right to decide what agricultural products enter this country and under what conditions. American producers operate under American regulations, and Canadian producers operate under Canadian regulations. Those standards do not have to be identical. If Canada has different rules involving hormones, pesticides, additives, labeling, or food production, then those are Canadian decisions under Canadian law. We are a country. That's what countries do. There's another issue here that, for me, may be even bigger than tariffs or dairy quotas, and that is trust. How do you negotiate a long-term trade agreement with an administration when you're no longer confident that the agreement will still mean the same thing tomorrow? We've watched Donald Trump impose tariffs, threaten tariffs, postpone tariffs, change deadlines, announce agreements, and then change the terms. At some point, a signature on a piece of paper has to mean something. A deal isn't a deal if one side can wake up tomorrow morning and decide they don't like it anymore. It's not negotiating. That's leverage. That's bullying. And Canada cannot build its economic future around the mood of one American president. There was a time when Canada could negotiate with the United States, knowing that once an agreement was made and signed, both countries would generally honor it. We might disagree. We might challenge one another through established dispute mechanisms. We might negotiate portions of an agreement, and all of that is normal. What is happening now is not normal. We're being asked to negotiate while tariffs are being used as a threat hanging over the table. Give us what we want or we'll hit you with another tariff. Well, eventually Canada has to be willing to call that bluff. And apparently last night we did just that. Does that mean this is going to be painless? Of course not. There will be consequences. Canadian businesses will be hurt by this. So will American businesses. Consumers on both sides of the border will pay more for some products. You see, nobody wins in a trade war. I don't celebrate that. What I do celebrate is a Canadian government finally realizing and recognizing that there are circumstances where no deal is better than a bad deal. Prime Minister Carney summed it up rather well this morning. The Americans asked too much and offered too little. That's the issue in one sentence. Canada went to Washington looking for a mutually beneficial agreement. We didn't get one, so we walked away. Good. Now, we continue doing what Canada should be doing much more aggressively for decades. Building new markets, strengthening trade relationships with Europe and Asia, removing barriers within Canada, that's a big one, and reducing our overwhelming economic dependence on the United States. I recognize that America will always be our neighbor, and hopefully someday we'll once again be able to be predictable and trusted as economic partners, as Canadians have grown accustomed to in the past. Right now, under Donald Trump, it isn't that way, and that's unfortunate, but that is the reality. So today, I stand firmly behind our Canadian negotiating team and behind Prime Minister Mark Carney. Not because I want a trade war, I don't. Not because I dislike Americans, I don't. And certainly not because I believe Canada can simply ignore the importance of the American market. We can't ignore it. I support them because there's a point where a country has to decide what it's prepared to trade away in order to get a deal. Our sovereignty? No, that's off the table. Our ability to trade with the rest of the world? Well, no, that's no one's business but ours. Our language and culture? Of course not. Our right to establish Canadian standards and Canadian law? No. Those are not negotiating positions. Those things are things that make us a country. So if the choice between signing a deal that compromises those principles or walking away from the table, then pick up the briefcase and come on home. And we'll figure out what comes up next later. We are Canadian. We've done that before. That's my North of opinion for today. What are your thoughts? I'm interested in hearing from you. Leave your comments below. And thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.